convenience store on a state highway that most people only stopped at because they had no other option. A gas station attached to a small shop, lottery tickets, energy drinks, dusty cans of soup that had probably been on the shelf since the previous owner. Most nights, that last part was the hardest. The clientele was mostly harmless, truckers passing through, regulars coming in for cigarettes and leaving without much conversation. I'd been doing it for about 4 months, and it settled into that specific tired comfort you get with night work. The night it happened was deep into winter, cold enough that every customer who came in brought a draft of freezing air with them. He came in around 2:15 a.m. A man, maybe mid-40s, wearing a dark weather jacket that looked like it had spent more time outdoors than indoors. He didn't acknowledge me when he walked in. No nod, no eye contact. With hands in his pockets, he went straight to the back of the store, to the last aisle. Household supplies, motor oil. The things people only buy when something's already gone wrong. And he stopped at the end of it. He stood with his back to me, not reaching for anything, just standing. I watched him for a few minutes. He didn't pick anything up, just stood there with his arms at his sides, head slightly bowed, like he was reaching the floor. I told myself he was tired. I went back to watching the small TV behind the register. But every few minutes I'd look up, and he'd be in the exact same position. 20 minutes passed like that. I finally walked over, not because I was scared, not yet. I came around the aisle and said, "Hey, you finding everything okay?" He turned around slowly. His face wasn't right. His mouth was slightly open. His eyes were wide and dry, like he hadn't blinked in a while. He looked at me for a long moment, then turned back to the shelf like I hadn't spoken. I went back to the counter and told myself it was nothing. I kept glancing at the security mirror in the ceiling corner. He hadn't moved. Then, about 15 minutes later, he did. He crouched down and removed his shoes, unlaced them carefully, placed them side by side against the base of the shelving unit. Then he peeled off his socks, folded them once, and set them on top. He stood up barefoot on the linoleum and resumed his position, still facing the shelf, still not touching anything. The deliberateness of it made my stomach drop. It wasn't frantic, it was neat, considered, like he was following some steps he'd rehearsed 100 times before. He then walked slowly toward the front of the store and pressed both palms flat against the glass door, looking out into the parking lot. He stayed like that for a long moment, his breath fogging the glass. Then he turned and looked directly at me for the first time. That's when I saw his hands. The glass where his palms had been was smeared dark. His hands were torn open across the knuckles, ragged wounds that looked less like an accident and more like he dragged them across something unforgiving. Blood had been soaking into the cuffs of his jacket the entire time he'd been in the store. A small dark puddle had formed at his feet. He wasn't reacting to any of it. His face was stone. Then, something behind his eyes hardened. His jaw set. He took one step toward the counter and said it, not as a question, but like an accusation he'd been holding back for the entire hour. "Did you check outside?" His voice was low and tight and furious, like I'd done something to him, like I owed him an answer I'd been withholding. I told him I didn't know what he meant. He took another step forward, his bloody hands curling at his sides, and said it again, louder, angrier, the words punching out of it. "Did you check outside?" I called 911. I didn't hesitate. I told the dispatcher there was a man bleeding and becoming aggressive. While I was on the phone, I slowly backed toward the stockroom door behind the counter. He was watching me move. His chest was heaving. Whatever had been holding him together for the past hour was completely gone. He lunged toward the counter just as I got through the door and through the bolt. What came next I still hear sometimes when the house is quiet. He hit that door like he'd been running at it, not knocking, hitting it. Open palms first, then fists, then what felt like his full body weight slamming into the frame in a rhythm that didn't sound entirely human. The door shook. Things fell off the shelves around him. He was screaming by then. Not words, just raw sound that came up through the walls and sat in my chest like something physical. I was standing in the far corner with my back against the shelving unit, phone to my ear, telling the dispatcher to please hurry. Then, about 2 minutes in, it stopped. All at once. The pounding, the screaming, gone. I didn't move. I just sat there in the corner listening to myself breathe. The police arrived shortly after and swept the entire building and parking lot. They came back and told me he was nowhere to be found. His shoes were still at the back of the aisle, socks folded neatly on top. Blood smears on the front door, a trail of dark spots leading outside that simply stopped a few feet past the entrance, like he'd evaporated. No follow-up, no case number. I don't know if he was ever found, or what happened to his hands before he walked into my store, or what he believed was waiting in that parking lot. I quit the following week. I've driven past the store exactly once since, during the day, and I didn't stop. I think about those words constantly. Did you check outside? The fury in them, the certainty, like I was supposed to already know, like I'd failed at something by not knowing. I've never found an interpretation that puts me at ease, but the thought that finds me at 2 a.m., the one I can't shake, is what would have happened if I hadn't locked that stockroom door. I got through it by maybe 2 seconds. 2 seconds between me throwing that bolt and him hitting the other side of it. I don't know what he would have done. I don't know what he was capable of in that state. With that look in his eyes, and that kind of fury in his hands, I just know I locked the door. And I genuinely don't know what would have happened if I hadn't. I grew up in a small town in rural Georgia, and if you know anything about small towns in rural Georgia, you know strange things happen there regularly enough that you stop being surprised. So when I tell you what happened to me a few months ago still keeps me up at night, I need you to understand the weight of that. I work nights at a fulfillment warehouse about 30 miles outside of town. It's not glamorous. I scan boxes and load pallets and try to stay awake until 4 a.m. Then I drive home on roads that are almost always completely empty. I've been doing it for about 2 years. I know that drive the way I know my own face. There's a country road I take as a shortcut, Route 9. It cuts maybe 12 minutes off the drive by passing by the main highway interchange. It's a 2-lane road through farmland and pine forest. No streetlights, no houses for most of it. I've driven it maybe 400 times. I say that to explain why. When I noticed the truck parked at the edge of Harlan's field one night, I noticed it immediately. It didn't belong there. It was a white pickup, maybe a mid-2000s Ford, and it was pulled off to the right side of the road with no lights on. Not hazards, not headlights, nothing. Just sitting there in the dark like it had grown out of the ground. I slowed down as I passed it. Couldn't see anyone inside. I kept going, telling myself it was a farmer who'd had a breakdown, which is plausible enough. Farmers have breakdowns. I forgot about it. About 3 weeks later, I took Route 9 again. It was a Tuesday, maybe 4:15 in the morning. I came around the long bend before the tree line and saw it. The same white truck, same spot, no lights, except this time there was someone standing behind it. He was a heavy-set man, maybe 50 or 60 years old, wearing a reflective vest like a road worker would wear. He had both arms stretched out, palms down, in this unmistakable gesture for me to slow down and stop. His face was completely blank, not panicked the way someone would look if they'd broken down, just blank and still. I slowed to about 10 miles per hour and rolled down my window. He walked to my car, and I noticed he didn't walk quickly. He had all the time in the world. He told me, in a very calm voice, that a tree had come down across the road about a half a mile ahead. He said it happened an hour ago and nobody had cleared it yet. He said I needed to take the access road just past the creek, said it looped back to the highway. Easy enough to find, he said, just past the metal gate with the orange reflector on it. Something about his voice made me feel cold. It wasn't threatening. That's what I keep trying to explain when I tell this story. He wasn't aggressive or pushy. He was so calm that it was wrong. The way a face with no expression is worse than a face with a bad one. I thanked him and drove forward. I told myself I'd just drive until I saw the tree. I figured if there really was a downed tree, I'd turn around. If there wasn't, I'd keep going. Simple. I passed the access road, gravel track, metal gate, orange reflector. All exactly where he said it would be. I kept driving. There was no tree across the road. I drove the rest of the way home without any obstruction at all. When I got inside, I sat in my kitchen for a long time without turning the lights on. I kept thinking about the reflective vest. Why do you get a reflective vest at 4 a.m? You own one. You plan to be seen. I didn't take Route 9 for almost a month after that. I started using the highway even though it added time. I told myself I was being irrational, that the guy was just a farmer who'd misremembered where the tree fell or been confused about which road it was on. There were 100 explanations. I cycled through all of them and none of them stuck. Then one afternoon in late October, I was off that night. I drove out there. Broad daylight. I drove Route 9 slow, looking at everything. The access road past the creek was still there, and the metal gate with the orange reflector. When I pulled up to it and stopped, I could see down the gravel track maybe 70 or 80 feet before it curved behind the tree line. There was something at the base of a pine tree just before the curve. I thought it was trash at first. I put the car in park and looked harder. It was a reflective vest, folded and left there, tucked against the root of the tree like someone had set it down deliberately, like it was waiting. When I got home, I called the county sheriff's non-emergency line. I told the whole story. The officer I spoke to was polite. He said he'd pass it along. I don't know if he did or not. I never heard anything back. Here's what I can't square. The gate had a padlock on it when I drove out there during the day. I'm certain of that, because I thought about getting out to look closer and decided against it when I saw the lock. A padlock means either someone owns that property and didn't want people going in, which is normal enough, or someone put a lock on it after the fact. After whatever happened on that road stopped needing to happen. I don't know which it is. I've looked up the property records and that parcel is listed under an LLC with no name attached to it, which isn't unusual, but it isn't exactly comforting either. I still drive Route 9 sometimes. I don't know why. Habit maybe, or some part of me that still wants to understand what I came close to. The white truck has never been back. But every time I pass that gate with the orange reflector, I look down the gravel track as far as I can see. I've never seen anything, but I always get this feeling like something is watching me drive away. I work the overnight shift at a 24-hour laundromat. I know how that sounds. It's not exactly a career, but it's quiet. It's mine. And after everything that happened with my last job, quiet was exactly what I needed. My name is Daniel. I'm 27. I fold other people's clothes from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And until about 6 weeks ago, the strangest thing that ever happened to me on shift was a guy trying to wash a full motorcycle jacket with the zipper still attached. It started with a woman. She came in around 1 a.m. on a Tuesday, which isn't unusual. We get a certain type of customer in the dead hours, people who work odd schedules, people who don't want to be seen, people who just couldn't sleep. She was maybe mid-40s, plain looking, with a laundry bag that seemed way too light to justify a trip at that hour. She loaded one machine, sat down with her back to the wall, and didn't look at her phone once. She just stared at the drum going around. I noticed her the way you notice anything slightly off when you're bored enough, but I didn't think much of it. She came back the following Tuesday. Same time, same light bag, same machine, same seat. The Tuesday after that, I started watching for her. She showed up at 12:58 a.m. I know because I checked the clock when I heard the door. She nodded at me this time. Small, tight nod, like we had some kind of understanding. I nodded back. By the 4th week, I started thinking of her as a regular, the way bartenders do. I even had a name for her in my head. I called her Margaret, though I had no idea what her actual name was. It was on the 5th visit that something had shifted. I was in the back, sorting through the lost and found when I heard her come in. When I came back out front, she was already seated. But this time she was looking directly at the counter, at the spot where I usually stand, like she'd been waiting for me to appear. I smiled, did the professional nod thing, and went back to my work. A few minutes later, I heard her voice for the first time. "You live on Deller Street," she said. Not a question. I looked up. She was still facing the machines, not looking at me. "Sorry?" I said. "Off Deller, the gray building, 3rd floor." My mouth went dry. "I do live on Deller Street, 3rd floor, gray building." I stood there for a second trying to figure out how to respond to that, running through explanations. Maybe she lived nearby. Maybe it was a guess. Maybe I'd seen her around the neighborhood and just hadn't made the connection. I asked her as calmly as I could manage if she lived in that area too. She didn't answer. Her machine finished its cycle. She transferred her clothes to a dryer, sat back down, and didn't say another word for the rest of her visit. When the dryer was done, she collected her things and left. I stood at the window and watched her walk to a blue car I didn't recognize. And then she was gone. I barely slept the next day. The following week, I almost called in sick. I went back and forth on it for an hour before I finally convinced myself I was overreacting. She knew my street. It didn't mean anything. Lots of people knew my street. I went to work. She came in at 12:58 again. And this time she sat down, and without any preamble, without even looking at me, she said, "You should call your brother." I don't talk about my brother at work. I've never mentioned him to anyone there. My brother and I have been estranged for almost 3 years, following a falling out that I'm not going to get into here. The point is, there's absolutely no casual way she could have known I had a brother, let alone that there was something unresolved between us. That last part is an assumption on my part, but the way she said it, the weight of it, didn't feel like a pleasantry. I asked her directly that time. I came out from behind the counter and asked her who she was and how she knew anything about me. She turned and looked at me for the first time, really looked at me, and she said, very quietly, "I'm just a woman doing her laundry." Then she went back to staring at the machine. I called out sick the next 2 weeks, told my manager it was a stomach thing. He didn't push back. I spent those 2 weeks trying to figure out who she was, running through every possible explanation. An old neighbor, a friend of a friend, someone I'd wronged without realizing it. I came up empty every time. When I finally went back, she wasn't there. Not that Tuesday, not the next. I started to think maybe it was over. Maybe she'd said what she wanted to say and moved on. I almost felt disappointed, which is insane, but that's the truth. Then, last Tuesday, I found something tucked under the windshield wiper of my car. It was a photograph, a printed photograph, slightly grainy, clearly taken from some distance. It was me, walking into my building, shot from across the street. On the back, in the same kind of careful handwriting you'd see in a get well card, were 2 sentences. "I've been watching longer than you know. You'll understand eventually." I went to the police the next morning. I showed them the photograph, told them everything. They took a report. They told me to keep my doors locked and to let them know if anything else happened. I could tell by the way the officer said it, I shouldn't expect much. That was 5 days ago. She hasn't come back to the laundromat. My manager says she hasn't been in at all, not even on days I wasn't there. It's like she's just gone. And some part of me, the part that hasn't slept properly in weeks, almost finds that worse than if she had come back. What I keep coming back to, what I can't stop turning over, is the thing she said about my brother. Because here's the part I didn't mention before. The same night she first said it, before I'd even had time to process it, I got a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. No voicemail. I looked it up later. The area code was his city. I don't know what she wanted, and I don't want to think it's my brother who's trying to do something, because what happened between us was the kind of thing that doesn't get forgiven easily. I don't know if the photograph was a threat or a warning or something else entirely, and I don't know if she's still watching. I'm back at work now because I need the money, and I refuse to let a stranger with a light laundry bag and too much information take that from me. But I check the parking lot every hour, and I keep my phone face up on the counter. And every Tuesday at 12:58, I watch the door. This was about 4 years ago. I was 24, freshly out of college with a communications degree that wasn't doing much for me, and I'd taken a job as a night auditor at a mid-sized hotel in a suburb outside of Pittsburgh. Not a dump, but not a nice place either. The kind of hotel that hosts regional sales conferences and airport layovers. 3 floors, 87 rooms, an indoor pool that smelled like chemicals, and a lobby that felt smaller at night than it did during the day. The shift was 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I was alone the entire time. No bellhop, no manager on duty. Just me behind the front desk in a back office the size of a closet. My job was to run the financial reports, handle any late check-ins, and answer the phone. Most nights, nothing happened. I'd finish the audit by 2 a.m. and spend the rest of the shift watching videos on my phone. It was the loneliest job I ever had, but it was easy. And easy felt like enough at the time. The night I'm talking about was a Tuesday in late November. The hotel was maybe at 30% occupancy, which was normal for a weekday that late in the year. I clocked in, got the handoff from the evening auditor, and settled in. By midnight, the lobby was empty and the phones had gone quiet. At 1:15, the elevator dinged. I looked up expecting a guest coming down for ice or a vending machine run. The doors opened. Nobody there. I watched the empty elevator for a second, then looked back down at my screen. Old buildings do that. Elevators get called to floors by mistake or the button stick. I didn't think anything of it. 15 minutes later, it dinged again. Same thing. Empty car. Doors open. Doors close. I checked the panel behind the desk that shows which floor the elevator is on. It read 2. Then, while I was watching it, it changed to 3, then back to 2, like it was being called back and forth between floors. I called up to the 3rd floor on the house phone. The hotel had dedicated floor or hallway phones. No answer. I tried the 2nd floor. Nothing. It wasn't unusual for guests not to answer, but something about the rhythm of it, the repetition, made my stomach feel hollow. I walked to the elevator and rode it to the 2nd floor. The hallway was empty and perfectly still. I stood there and listened for probably 30 seconds. The ice machine hummed at the far end of the corridor. A television murmured behind one of the room doors. Normal sounds. I rode back down and told myself to stop looking for problems. By 2:45, I'd finished the audit and was starting to feel the familiar drag of the overnight shift. I made a cup of coffee in the back office and sat down with it. That's when I noticed the camera feeds on the monitor in the corner. We had 8 cameras: lobby, parking lot, both stairwells, the pool, the breakfast area, the 2nd floor hallway, and the 3rd floor hallway. I glanced at them dozens of times that night without seeing anything. But this time, on the 3rd floor feed, I thought I saw something, a shape maybe, near the far end of the hall. I leaned in. The resolution wasn't great, and the hallway lighting at night was reduced to save energy, leaving everything in that same flat gray-yellow wash I'd stopped noticing months ago. I stared at the feed for a long time. The shape didn't move. I convinced myself it was a luggage cart someone had left out, or maybe a shadow from the exit sign. I looked away. When I looked back 2 minutes later, it was closer. Not dramatically closer, maybe 10 feet, but I was certain. I had been staring at that screen long enough to know where the shape had been, and now it was somewhere else. I sat completely still and watched the feed for the next 4 minutes without blinking. The shape didn't move again, but it was there, maybe halfway down the hall now. and the longer I stared at it, the less it looked like a luggage cart. It looked like a person, standing very, very still. I picked up the phone and called the third floor. The phone rang 11 times. I called the front office line from my cell simultaneously, just to make sure the system was working. It rang immediately. The third floor line kept going. Nobody picked up. I thought about calling my manager. I genuinely did, but I had nothing concrete to tell him. A shape on a camera, an elevator moving by itself. I've been working there long enough to know how that conversation would go. And I didn't want to be the new kid who panicked over shadows. So I grabbed my master key card and took the stairwell up to 3. The hallway was empty. No luggage cart, no guest standing in the hall. Nothing at all except closed doors and that flat, humming silence. I walked the full length of the corridor twice, trying door handles out of instinct even though I knew I had no reason to enter a room. All locked, all quiet. I went back to the stairwell. That's when I heard it, somewhere below me, in the stairwell itself. There were footsteps. Slow, deliberate, one for things that didn't sit right with me. We met through a mutual friend at a cookout and exchanged numbers. Nothing unusual about that. She was funny, easy to talk to, and I figured it was worth seeing where things went. For the first week or two, everything was pretty normal. Then one afternoon, I mentioned offhand that I was heading to the gym, and about 40 minutes later I got a text saying, "You look tired walking in. Everything okay?" I didn't think much of it at the time. The gym was maybe a 10-minute drive from my apartment. I never told her which one I went to. I chalked it up to coincidence, figured maybe she went to the same place and happened to be there. I didn't bring it up. That was probably my first mistake. Things moved pretty fast after that, which looking back was a pattern I kept missing. She'd reference things I'd done or places I'd been without me ever mentioning them. I'd post nothing on social media, tell her nothing, and she'd say something like, "How was that coffee place on Harmon?" Or, "Did the traffic on 5th bother you this morning?" Each time there was a reasonable explanation I could reach for. She could have driven past. Someone could have mentioned it. I kept reaching. About a month in, I ended things. It wasn't dramatic. We hadn't even officially called it dating, so there wasn't much to end. I just told her I thought we were better as friends. She took it fine on the surface. Too fine, maybe. She just said okay, and that was it. No argument, no follow-up. I remember thinking it went surprisingly smooth. The text started 3 days later. Not threatening, not unhinged, just steady. 1 in the morning, 1 around noon, 1 before bed. Always something ordinary. Hope your day's going well. Did you eat? Saw something that made me think of you. I responded once or twice out of guilt, which I now know was the wrong move. When I stopped responding entirely, the frequency didn't change. It just continued at the same pace, like a clock ticking in another room. That's the part that got to me. There was no escalation, no reaction to my silence. It was like she didn't need a response, like she wasn't waiting for one. About 2 weeks into the silence, I started sleeping with my blinds fully closed. I couldn't explain it rationally. My apartment was on the 2nd floor and faced a quiet side street. There was no reason to feel watched, but somewhere around 1 in the morning, I'd get this feeling like the air in the room had shifted, and I'd lie there staring at the ceiling until it passed. I told myself it was stress. I was in my last semester. Work was picking up. It made sense to be on edge. Then one night, I woke up about 2 a.m. to a sound I couldn't place at first. It was low, rhythmic, almost like breathing but not quite. I sat up and just listened. It stopped. I waited a few minutes, didn't hear it again, and went back to sleep. In the morning, I found a small mark on the outside of my window ledge. It looked like something had been resting against it. A hand maybe, or a forearm. The paint was slightly scraped, like whatever it was had been there long enough to leave something behind. I told myself it could have been anything. The last time I saw her was a Tuesday. I'd gotten home late from a shift, but but instead of cutting through the front like I normally would, I came in through the back entrance. There was a construction blocking the usual route, so I looped around and came up the rear stairwell. It was nothing deliberate, just a shortcut that happened to work that night. When I got to my room, I set my bag down, and out of habit, drifted toward the window that faces the front parking lot. There was a car I didn't recognize parked directly across from the building's entrance. Engine off, no lights, just sitting there in a spot that's usually empty because the drain next to it floods when it rains. Nobody parks there. I stood back from the glass so I wouldn't be visible, and just watched. After a few minutes, the driver's door opened. It was Maya. She didn't look up at the building, didn't look around. She walked to the back of her car with this calm, deliberate kind of movement, the way someone moves when they've already made a decision. She opened the trunk, and then just stood there with her back to me. Not rummaging, not shifting things around, just standing, still, for what felt like a long time. Then she reached in and lifted something out. It was long, maybe 3.5 feet, wrapped completely in a bag, the kind with a zipper running the full length. She held it with both hands, one near each end, like she was being careful with it. She closed the trunk with her elbow and then sat down on the back of the car, the bag across her lap, and just waited. She was facing the front entrance of my building. I didn't move. I don't think I breathed properly for the next several minutes. I stood back in the dark of my room and watched her sit there, completely still, the bag resting across her legs, eyes on the door I would have walked through if I hadn't come in from the back that night. After maybe 20 minutes, she stood up, put the bag in the trunk, got in the car, and drove away. I've thought about those 20 minutes every day since. I've thought about what was in that bag, the shape of it, the length, the way she handled it with two hands and kept it level, the way she sat facing that entrance like she was expecting someone to walk out, like she was timing something. The text stopped the following morning. No final message, no explanation, just gone. And that's the thing I keep coming back to, the part I genuinely cannot square. She stopped the exact morning after she drove away with whatever was in that bag. Not gradually, not with a final angry message, just a full stop, like a switch flipping. The only reason I can think of for someone to stop like that, after weeks of clockwork contact, is that something changed. Either what she was planning didn't happen the way she intended, or she realized something that night that made her reconsider. I don't know if that's why I'm still here. I don't know if that's too dramatic a conclusion to draw from a woman sitting on her car with a bag, but I know what I saw, and I know the shape of that bag, and I know she was waiting for someone who she thought hadn't come home yet. I moved out 6 weeks later. I didn't tell anyone the real reason. I still don't take the front entrance at night. I don't know if that's paranoia or just sense at this point. Probably some of both. I just know I'm glad I took the shortcut. I don't smoke. Neither does my roommate, Diane. So when I came home one afternoon and the apartment smelled faintly like cigarettes, I just kind of stood there for a second, sniffing the air. Diane was at work. I'd been out all morning running errands. I figured maybe a neighbor had been smoking in the hallway and somehow it drifted under the door. Our building is old. The ventilation is garbage. I cracked a window and forgot about it. Diane was barely home that month anyway, always at her boyfriend's. She wouldn't have noticed either. That was probably my first mistake. Some context. I had ended a 2-year relationship with a guy named Marcus about a month before this. Nothing explosive, no big blowout. I just realized one day I'd spent most of those 2 years walking on eggshells, and the relief I felt when I pictured my life without him was answer enough. He didn't take it well, but he didn't make a scene either. He just went quiet in this very deliberate way that, in hindsight, I should have paid more attention to. We hadn't had any contact since. I kept things clean. No follow-up texts, no checking his social media. I'd moved into a new apartment with Diane 2 weeks after the breakup, so he didn't even have my address. Or so I thought. I must have gotten careless at some point. Maybe he followed me once. Maybe he saw me moving. I'll never know. The first thing was the cigarette smell. Marcus smoked. I always hated it. The second thing happened maybe a week later. I got home from work and went to put my keys on the hook by the door, same as always. And I noticed my spare key wasn't there. I keep the spare on the hook just out of habit. It's been there since the day I moved in. I tore through the apartment looking for it. Coat pockets, bathroom shelf, the kitchen drawer where I throw everything I don't know what to do with. Nothing. I texted Diane. She said she hadn't touched it. I told myself I must have moved it somewhere and forgotten. I searched the whole apartment but couldn't find it. Eventually I gave up, ordered a replacement from the hardware store. I didn't think about it again for a while. About 2 weeks later, I started noticing that things in my bedroom were slightly off. Not in a dramatic way. It was more like the feeling you get when you come back from a trip and something in your room looks different, but you can't put your finger on it. The first time I noticed it, the charger on my nightstand was on the wrong side. I'm left-handed, so I always keep it on the left. It was on the right. I moved it back. I assumed I'd done it in the dark while half asleep. The second time, the book on my nightstand was face down while I always leave it face up. Small things, dismissible things. But then one evening I opened my closet to grab a jacket, and the clothes were hanging in a different order than I leave them. I keep everything organized, jackets on the left, then sweaters, then everything else. That evening the jackets were in the middle. I stood in front of that closet for a long time. I didn't say anything to Diane. I didn't want to sound paranoid. The thing that finally made me say something out loud happened on a Thursday night. I was taking a shower and I heard the bathroom door handle move. Not open, just move. The way it does when someone grips it from the outside and then stops. I called out Diane's name. No answer. I turned off the water and stood there in the tub just listening. Nothing. When I got out, I opened the door and the hallway was empty. I checked the apartment. Diane wasn't home. She texted me earlier that she was staying at her boyfriend's. I was alone. I checked every room, every closet, under the beds. Nothing. I deadbolted the front door and sat on the couch with my phone in my hand for about an hour trying to talk myself down. Old building, I told myself. The pipes make sounds. The handles rattle sometimes. The walls are thin and sound carries from the neighboring unit. No cameras in the building. No security. Just an open front door that anyone could walk through. I almost believed myself. A few nights later, I woke up at around 3 a.m., probably a bad dream. I lay there in the dark for a minute, and that's when I registered the smell. Faint, but there. Cigarettes. I sat up slowly. My eyes adjusted enough that I could make out the shapes in my room. The dresser, the desk, the chair in the corner. I stared at the chair because something about it looked different. It took me a few seconds to understand why. There were clothes draped over the back of it, a shirt, something dark bunched on top, the kind of pile that in the dark, at 3 a.m., with your heart already hammering, looks exactly like a person sitting very still. I don't remember leaving clothes in that chair. I never leave clothes in that chair. My brain assembled a shape before I could stop it. Shoulders, a torso, the suggestion of a head. I sat frozen, staring at it, telling myself it was nothing. Just fabric, just shadows filling in the gaps. I turned on the lamp. Marcus was sitting in the chair. He didn't move. He just looked at me, his hands resting on his knees, his expression almost calm. The way he used to look when he was waiting for me to stop talking so he could say what he'd already decided to say. The jacket was his, the dark boxy one he'd had for years. He was wearing it. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. He tilted his head slightly. "You stopped answering my calls," he said. like that was a complete explanation. Like that made any of this reasonable.
A moment of realization.
I just wanted to make sure you were okay, that you were safe. I couldn't speak for a moment. Safe. The word landed somewhere wrong. How did you get in? I asked. He shrugged like it was nothing. The main door to the building was open. It's always open. I just walked in. He paused. And your spare key was right there on the hook, so I borrowed it. I was always going to tell you. Borrowed. Like it was the most normal thing in the world. Like none of this was what it was. That first afternoon, the cigarette smell, Diane at work, me out all morning. He must have walked into the building through an unsecured front door and let himself into my apartment. The spare key had been sitting right there on the hook. He'd taken it, had a duplicate cut, and came back to return the original. The extra key on the hook that final morning. I don't know how many times he had let himself in before that night. I don't know how long he had been sitting in that chair in the dark watching me sleep. I reported him the next morning, filed everything, the key, the entries, the night I found him sitting in my room. They went to Marcus's apartment 2 days later. He was gone. His landlord said he'd cleared out fast, left furniture behind, no forwarding address. They told me there was a warrant out, that I should contact them if I heard from him. I changed the locks that same day. I told Diane everything. I started sleeping with the light on. Somewhere out there, Marcus is running from the consequence. From the version of himself he became when I stopped letting him control the story. I don't know which thought keeps me up more at night. That he's out there somewhere else, or that some part of him still believes he did nothing wrong. I met Daniel at a ceramics class I only signed up for because my therapist said I needed a hobby. He was the kind of person who made everyone in the room feel like they were the only one in it. We dated for about 2 years. The first year was genuinely one of the best of my life. I don't talk about the second year much. After we ended things, I moved to a different city for work. Fresh start, new apartment, all that. The first few weeks were quiet in a good way. I was sleeping through the night, eating actual meals, calling my mom back. I felt like myself again for the first time in a long time. Then I noticed the mug. It was sitting on my kitchen counter, maybe 3 weeks after I moved in. Just a plain white mug with a small chip on the handle. I didn't own it, or at least I didn't think I did. I figured it must have gotten mixed into my boxes somehow, maybe grabbed by accident from Daniel's place, and I just hadn't noticed it until now. I put it in the cabinet and didn't think about it again. That was the first thing. About 6 weeks in, I ran into my downstairs neighbor in the hallway, older woman, friendly enough. She'd mentioned she'd seen my boyfriend the other week, said he seemed nice. I told her I didn't have a boyfriend. I moved here alone. She looked a little embarrassed and said she must have mixed me up with someone else. I believed her. Buildings have a lot of tenants. People get confused. I didn't think about it again until I was lying in bed that night. And then I thought about it for about 3 more hours before I finally fell asleep. I got a job in the city through a recruiter I'd found online. I had never mentioned it to Daniel. He didn't know my new address, my new number, or where I was working. I was careful about it. Not paranoid, just careful. There's a difference. 3 months in, I got a card in my mailbox. No envelope, just a card, folded once, with my name written on the front in handwriting I recognized immediately. Inside it said, "Congratulations on the new job. You always work too hard for too little." That was it. Nothing else. No name, no return address. I stood there in the lobby for probably 5 minutes just staring at it. My first thought was that he must have talked to someone we knew in common. My second thought was that I hadn't told anyone in common where I worked. My third thought was that I needed to sit down. I called my sister that night. She swore she hadn't told him anything. I believed her. I still do, which is the part that bothers me. I started being more deliberate. I closed all my blinds at night. I got a different mail slot, one inside the building manager's office that required a key. I told myself I was being proactive, not reactive. For about 2 months, nothing happened. I started to relax. Then I came home from the grocery store on a Tuesday evening and found my welcome mat moved. I know how that sounds. It's a welcome mat. It's not a big deal, except for the fact I'm someone who straightens picture frames that are off by a millimeter. I knew exactly where that mat sat at. It had been rotated slightly, maybe 15 degrees, and pushed about 4 inches closer to the door. I went inside and checked every room. Nothing was missing. Nothing was out of place. The windows and locks were all fine. I called the building manager and asked if anyone had been on our floor. He checked the entry log and said no guests had buzzed in that day. I didn't sleep much that night. The mat thing could have been the cleaning crew. It could have been a neighbor bumping it by accident. I told myself both of those things and almost convinced myself. Almost. The last thing happened on a Sunday morning. I was going through some boxes I still hadn't unpacked. One of them was from my old apartment, stuff I'd thrown in at the last minute. Books, a few picture frames, some random kitchen things.
House job I didn't love. My social circle had slowly dried up the way it does in your mid-20s. People getting serious with girlfriends, taking over time, moving to different parts of town. So when I had a long weekend in July, I drove 3 hours north to a lake I used to fish with my dad, rented a cheap campsite, and figured I'd spend a few days mostly alone. The first night, I wandered into the only bar in the nearest small town. One of those wood-paneled places with mounted bass on the wall and a jukebox nobody ever uses. I sat down at the bar and ordered a beer, and within 20 minutes this guy next to me struck up a conversation. His name was Darren. He was maybe 45, heavyset, wore a canvas shirt with his sleeves rolled up. He had this big easy laugh and talked like someone who knew everyone in a room, even when he didn't. He said he was a retired contractor now doing odd jobs. Had a fishing cabin about 4 miles up the lake road. We ended up talking for 2 hours. Football, fishing, small town politics, normal stuff. When I got up to leave, he told me to come back tomorrow. He'd be there same time. I did go back, and the night after that. By the third night, Darren had become the highlight of the otherwise quiet trip. He introduced me to a couple of regulars. He bought me rounds. He asked good questions and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. I remember thinking he reminded me a little of my dad, before things between us got complicated. On my last night, he suggested we skip the bar and have a few beers at his fishing cabin instead. More relaxed out there, he said. I've got some decent whiskey, and the porch looks out right at the water. I hesitated for maybe half a second. Older guy, middle of nowhere, cabin in the woods. But I'd spent 3 nights with him. He never said anything that made me feel uncomfortable. I was 26, and I thought I could read people. I followed his truck down a dirt road into the trees. The cabin was small but well kept, right on the water like he said. He poured us both a glass of whiskey on the porch, and we sat there watching the lake go dark. It was genuinely peaceful. An hour passed, maybe more. That's when I noticed I couldn't track the conversation anymore. Darren was talking. I could hear him, but the words weren't connecting to anything. I blinked hard. My hands felt numb in a way that was separate from the cold. I had 3 drinks over the course of 2 hours. I should not have felt like this. I told him I didn't feel right. My voice came out strange, like it was arriving late. He said very calmly, "You're just tired. Go lay down in the back room." Something in me knew not to do that. Some very basic animal part of my brain started screaming, even as the rest of it was going soft. I stood up, or tried to. My legs buckled, and I went down to one knee on the porch. I remember the boards were cold and damp under my hand. Darren stood up slowly. He didn't rush. He didn't look scared or surprised. He looked like a man who was right on schedule. I shoved off the railing hard enough to get upright. I told him I was leaving. My truck was maybe 30 yards away in the dirt clearing where I'd parked it, and I focused on it like it was the only thing in the world. He stepped in front of me, not grabbing me, not threatening, just standing there, blocking. He said, "You're not okay to drive. I'm not going to let you do something stupid." I told him to move. He said, "Come on, just come inside." Something had gone out of his voice. The warmth was gone, and underneath it was something flat and practiced, like a thing he'd done before and knew the steps to. That was the moment I understood completely. Not theorized. Knew. I faked left, cut right, and ran for my truck. I don't know how I ran. My legs were like wet concrete, and my depth perception was shot. I heard him behind me, not running, just walking fast, still talking in that low measured tone, telling me to stop, telling me I was going to hurt myself. I got to the truck, got the door open, got the keys in the ignition after 2 tries. I locked the doors. He stood outside the driver's window. In the darkness, I could barely see his face. He put his hand flat on the glass, not hitting it, just resting it there. He said something I couldn't hear through the window and the rushing in my ears. I reversed down that dirt road faster than I should have been able to. I don't remember most of the drive. I do remember pulling into the parking lot of a gas station and sitting there shaking until a woman coming out with a coffee saw me and knocked on my window. I told her what happened. She called 911 and stayed with me until they arrived, which was the kindest thing a stranger's ever done for me. The hospital confirmed I'd been drugged. The deputy who took my statement looked unsurprised in a way that scared me more than almost anything else that night. He asked me Darren's last name and I didn't know. I gave him a description. I told him about the cabin. They would look into it, he said. I don't know what happened after that. I never heard back. I don't know if they found Darren, or what his real name was, or whether he's still out there on that porch right now, looking out at the water, waiting for the next easy stranger to walk into that bar.
The lesson I took from this story was always read through your lease/rental agreement fully before signing. This took place 4 years ago in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm originally from California, so trading up city life for a less urban life was very challenging for me. Making friends was hard, but I made the move to be with my dad, who lived in an apartment complex with a roommate. My dad was a trucker, so he was gone for weeks at a time. While I was left alone to work and come home to a foreign place that I was slowly becoming accustomed to. My roommate was gone most of the time because he had a girlfriend and he would leave his dog with me, so I never really truly felt alone. I had an old lady for a neighbor that would come up and check on me too. That's how people were in that area, and I found it kind of nice how people knew their neighbors. I got to know everybody in my building's name after about 6 months of living there, except for one. There was a man, I'd say in his early to mid-50s, who lived directly below my apartment. He looked, for lack of a better description, like a creep. He was balding except for on the sides of his head, where that hair was straggly too. He was tall and kind of skinny, and outdated 90s glasses that you'd see on America's Most Wanted, and a very thick mustache. He was the only person in the building who wasn't friendly, or at least didn't make the effort to say hello or introduce himself to me. He also happened to be the maintenance man for all 5 buildings. I didn't think much of this at first. I honestly don't care if you're not overtly friendly to me. I enjoy having space of my own, and sometimes being too friendly and suspicious anyway. That's just a personal problem, but I'm explaining why I didn't send up any red flags at first. One day, when I was pulling out of the driveway to go to work in the morning, I noticed across the large lawn that led to the door to our building that the maintenance man was standing in the center, staring directly at me. Stare is the wrong word, more like a glare. At first, I looked around confused, thinking perhaps he was looking at somebody or something behind me. I was the only one there. Although a bit creeped out, I shrugged it off and continued with my day, forgetting all about it. The next day, I was over at my neighbor Claire's apartment, the older lady, and she happened to bring up a maintenance issue she had, but mentioned she would never ask the maintenance man for anything, and neither should I. I tried to ask her more about what she meant by that, but she ended up being very broad and said something along the lines of, "He's just a known creep around here." Fast forward to the first incident. It was around 2 a.m. and I was still awake, but only barely, sitting on the couch watching Parks and Rec alone in the apartment. I was starting to drift off into sleep when I hear a soft noise near the front door. Thankfully, the show was very low in volume because normally I don't pick up on quiet noises most of the time. I turned off the TV and began listening. Next to the living room, on the right side is the patio area, and on the left are the kitchen and the front door. The light from the moon and outside lamps was flooding through the patio glass door, so I could see the doorknob to the front door moving. Not just moving, but somebody was using a key. In an instant, the door flung open and I was on my feet, with nowhere to hide at that point. I stood my ground and saw the silhouette step into the kitchen. That's when I saw it was the maintenance man. My stomach dropped and he stopped dead in his tracks when he spotted me, looking as if it was unexpected to find me awake. I noticed he had a large coat on, even though it wasn't winter or even cold that particular night. I noticed that only because the jacket looked bulky, as if he were carrying things in it that I couldn't see. "What the heck are you doing?" was all I managed to squeak out. I was shaking, my knees feeling like they were going to give out. For reference, I was a 22-year-old woman standing a whopping 5'4", with no way to defend myself at all from where I was standing. He looked shocked, which made me feel like I had gained a little power from the situation. He retorted confusedly and angrily with, "Yeah, your toilet is making a loud noise that I could hear from my bedroom." I was angry and terrified and only reacted with more anger when I saw him scrambling for excuses. "So, you just let yourself into my apartment at 2 in the morning? I'm reporting this to management the first thing in the morning." He stepped closer to me then. I backed up a few steps but still stood my ground, quickly turning on the light closest to me so he could see my fury. "The toilet is rumbling. I'm sorry, I need to check it now." Now I was trembling so hard I could barely stand. I had adrenaline and anger and fear all coursing heavily through my body. "Get the F out," I said. He started to take the liberty to look around the kitchen where he was standing. My head immediately thought, shit, what if he goes for a knife? And that's when he said it. "I can come in whenever I want." The sentence makes me shiver to this day. I didn't know what to do and felt like the power of this situation quickly dwindling down to a bad feeling that something bad was going to happen. "If you don't get out of my apartment right now, I'm going to start screaming as loud as I can." My voice was cracking and shaky, which made my heart drop into my stomach. I immediately felt like I was going to be sick when he took yet another step forward towards me. "Check the lease. I can come in whenever I want. I'll see you later." Then he winked at me, creating a wave of nausea, and I felt faint. He slowly turned around and walked out, closing the door behind him and even going far enough as to lock it from the outside with his extra key. The next day, I contacted management as soon as their office space opened. I could tell the conversation wasn't going anywhere when the manager sounded irritated right off the bat. When I told her that the guy entered my apartment illegally, she cut me off and told me that they do not allow any illegal activity and take what I was saying very seriously. I thought, yes, I've got him. Until the manager said, "You can't just throw around accusations without proof. This man has dedicated over 20 years to working for this company and we don't plan on getting rid of him anytime soon. Perhaps if you've read over your lease, like you should have." Yes, she was actually scolding me. You would have seen the clause that states that a maintenance worker has the keys to the entire property and if there is a maintenance issue, they are permitted to access the property at any time of the day. This floored me. It couldn't possibly be illegal. Of course, I'm from California and of course I didn't read the lease carefully. When I moved there, my dad was already living in the apartment and I literally had nowhere else to go, so if I were to be living there, I was going to have to sign the lease no matter what, so I did. Needless to say, nothing got done. Fast forward again, a few days go by and I don't see Mr. Maintenance Freak until I do. This time I'm pulling in after a long 10-hour shift at work. I haven't forgotten about the scary incident, but I had put it at the back of my mind for the time being, to concentrate on other things. Although I lost sleep over it. I park my car facing the large lawn area again and start using my phone for a few minutes. I'm peering down at my phone and glance up for a split second before I see him there. He's standing across the lawn staring angrily at me again. I mean furious. I quickly look back down and pretend to have not seen him, getting that sinking feeling again. As a paranoid person, I put the key in the ignition just in case and pretend to keep scrolling on my phone while subtly locking my door. I glance up again and this time he's coming toward me, very fast. I look in my rearview mirror, hoping to see someone else that he may be stomping angrily toward, and of course, no one else is there. It's nearly dark now, but when he gets to about 10 to 15 feet away from the front of my car, I can hear him shouting something, but I can't make out what he's saying. Now I put my phone down and I'm watching him come right at me until he reaches my window and starts banging on it with all of his might and slams his body into the door. He's also fidgeting angrily with the handle, even though the doors are locked. My car doesn't have automatic locks, so I'm hoping that all my doors are locked at this point. My hands are shaking so bad that I'm having trouble starting the car. When I finally do, I realize what he's saying, which is a repeated cycle of the following phrases. "I'm going to get you, ho. I told you I can come in whenever I want. And you really want to take me on? I'll kill you." I peeled out of there so fast, not even knowing where to go. I drove to the next county over, found a motel, and stayed the night there. The next day, I took work off and went straight to the management's office. I told them exactly what happened, and no matter what I said, they didn't believe me. This maintenance man was apparently the most amazing thing in the world to them or something. He was a monument to the company, and they appreciated his 20 years of service and dedication to them over him risking someone's life with threats. Long story short, I lost it. I called her a psychotic idiot and ended up getting evicted. I reported all of this to the police, but between the lack of evidence I had and his perfect record / shining references from employers that seemed to love him, the police said there was nothing that they could do to move forward at that point. My dad and I ended up finding a nice home about 10 minutes away from that place. I ended up inviting Claire, my older neighbor, to the house a few months later. She told me that there was a single woman in the apartment before the roommate, and my dad had moved in there, who also left in a hurry after something happened with the maintenance man taking photos of her walking to and from her apartment to her car. When she confronted him about it, he told her, "I can do whatever I want." I guess in Kansas City, maintenance workers can do whatever they want. Needless to say, it's been 4 years and I'm back in California.
One note at a time. Vibe of searching.
3 years ago, I bought a house on about 4 acres of land outside of town, and I want to be upfront that I love it out here. Quiet and private, nobody in my business. Exactly what I wanted after 38 years of apartments and neighbors and shared walls. The property has a long gravel driveway that curves up from the road through a stretch of old oak trees before opening up to the house. At night, you can't see the road from the porch and you can't see the house from the road. That kind of privacy felt like a selling point when I bought it. It stopped feeling like one about 6 months in. The porch light is one of those old fixtures that came with the house, cast iron, mounted beside the front door, controlled by a simple interior switch. No timer and no motion sensor, no smart home connection of any kind. You flip it on and it comes up. You flip it off and it goes up. That's the whole system. I don't use it much. I go to bed early and I'm not in the habit of leaving lights on, and I don't get visitors at night, so there's no real need for it. I'd gone weeks at a stretch without touching the switch at all. So the first time I woke up at 2 in the morning and noticed the orange glow coming through my bedroom curtains, I assumed I left it on by mistake and fell back asleep without thinking much about it. I got up in the morning, switched it off, and moved on with my day. A week later, I woke up again. Same time, same glow through the curtains. I lay there for a moment trying to remember if I used the porch that evening. I hadn't. I got up and switched it off and stood in the kitchen for a minute and then went back to bed. The third time I started paying attention. I'm not a person who jumps to conclusions. I spent 22 years as a project manager, and that kind of work beats the instinct for magical thinking right out of you. When something goes wrong, you find the cause, you fix the cause, and you move on. So when the porch light started coming on by itself, my instinct was to find the cause. Faulty wiring seemed most likely. Old house, old fixture, old switch that maybe wasn't fully breaking the circuit when I flipped it down. I checked the switch. It seemed fine. But I'm not an electrician, so I called one out. He went over the fixture and the switch and the wiring to that circuit and found nothing wrong. Charged me $200 to tell me everything looked fine. I thanked him and he left, and 3 nights later the light came on again at 2 in the morning. I replaced the switch myself. Bought a new one from the hardware store, watched a video, swapped it out in 20 minutes. New switch, same result. The light came on at 2 a.m., the switch in the off position, with no explanation. I replaced the entire fixture next. Took the old cast iron one down and put up a new LED model. Different wiring, different housing, different everything. Stood back and felt pretty good about it. 2 nights later, around 2 a.m., the new fixture lit up the driveway like it had been doing it for years. I want to be honest about how long I sat with this house before I did anything about it. The answer is embarrassingly long. A couple of months. I'd wake up, see the glow, lie there for a minute, get up and turn it off and go back to bed. It had become routine enough that I stopped losing sleep over it and started just accepting it and explaining it off as annoying, unexplained, and probably just something I'd figure out eventually. What changed my mind about sitting with it was purely practical. I have a dog named Ruth, a 7-year-old shepherd mix, and Ruth sleeps at the foot of my bed every night without exception. She has done this since the week I got her, and in the 7 years, she has never once gotten up in the middle of the night on her own. Not for water, not for anything. She just sleeps. One night in November, I woke up to the light and noticed Ruth wasn't at the foot of the bed. I sat up and found her standing at the bedroom window with her nose to the gap in the curtain, completely still, not growling or whining, just standing there looking out the driveway. I got up and stood beside her and looked out. The driveway was lit by the porch light, per usual. The gravel, the oaks on either side, the darkness beyond where the driveway curved toward the road. All of it sitting in that flat orange light. I stood there for a few minutes and saw nothing and went back to bed. Ruth stayed at the window. In the morning, I went outside and walked the driveway. The gravel near the middle of the curve, where the oaks are the thickest on either side, had been disturbed. Not dramatically or like a struggle, just scuffed and pressed in a pattern that took me a moment to identify. Boot prints. Somebody had been standing in the gravel in the middle of my driveway. Standing there long enough and still enough that the prints were deep and clear, both feet planted facing the house. I stood there looking at them in the morning light and thought about the porch light coming on at 2 a.m. for months, and roothed at the window and felt something settle over me that I hadn't felt in a very long time. I put up a trail camera that afternoon, one of the good ones, motion activated, infrared night vision, mounted on an oak about halfway down the driveway, pointed at the curve where the prints had been. I didn't tell anyone about it, I just put it up and waited. 4 nights later I pulled the car. There was footage. At 2:06 a.m. the camera triggered. A man came around the curve from the direction of the road on foot, unhurried, hands at his sides. He walked to almost the exact spot where I'd found the boot prints and stopped. He stood there facing the house with the porch light on above the front door. He was wearing dark work clothes and boots and a cap pulled low, and from the angle in the infrared, I couldn't make out his face clearly. He stood there for 11 minutes without moving. Then he turned and walked back around the curve toward the road and was gone. The timestamp on the footage was the same night the porch light had come on. I called the county sheriff's office the next morning and a deputy came out, and I showed him the footage and the boot prints, which were still visible. He watched the footage twice and asked me how long this had been going on, and I told him about the light and the months I'd spent trying to explain it away, and watched his expression settle into something careful and professional. He took the camera card as evidence and told me to call immediately if anything else happened and to keep my doors locked. He came back 2 later with a detective. They'd identified the man from the footage using a partial on his boot sole that matched a specific work boot brand and some other details I wasn't given in full. He lived 4 miles from my property. He had a history that the detective described carefully as relevant to this type of situation without being more specific than that. I asked what he was doing standing in my driveway for 11 minutes in the middle of the night. The detective said they were working on establishing that. I'm female and I was 16 at the time. I'm probably 5'7", about 130 pounds. And I like to think that I'm strong, but I couldn't take on 2 young men. So it begins with my mom and stepfather going away on vacation and leaving my 17-year-old sister and me home alone. They did this often. My parents were not winning any parenting awards. My sister and I didn't get along either. She was a nasty piece of work. Luckily, she decided to go stay at a friend's house while my parents were away. I was kind of nervous about being alone, so I had my boyfriend staying with me. He was a pugnacious jerk, but I'm glad he was there. One night, Brett and I were at my house and we had just started messing around when I heard a really loud knock at the door. My room was in the basement, but at the landing area between the stairs. You know how some staircases are broken up and there's a turnaround area? That's the landing. There was a window which through I could see the stairs that led up to the alcove of our front porch. I could see 2 people standing there, and just as I was peeking out to see them better, one of them saw me. I remember feeling the breath sucked out of my chest. There were 2 young men sitting on the porch. It was almost midnight and I had no idea who the heck they were. The guy that saw me let his friend know, and they both looked in the window and asked me to come to the door. My boyfriend had gone upstairs to open the door, and I remember freaking out because I had told him not to. He was one of those guys that thought he was Mr. Tough Guy and believed he could fight anybody. He was telling the guys to leave just as I joined him at the door. They saw me and called me by name, and asked for me to let them in. Brett told him to screw off. One guy, I think, said his name was Wes or Les, something like that, said, "Come outside, just want to talk to you," to my boyfriend. I said, "No thanks, we're going to bed," and shut the door. I was really confused and getting very scared. They stood on my doorstep for a few minutes, then started knocking again. Wes, or Les, explained to me through the door that he was my sister's friend and that she had told him I was alone at the time and that they should come by. I knew my sister and I believed them. That did not, however, make me stupid. I told them to leave. They started kicking the door. I was shaking and I seriously feared that it would not hold up. I was so scared that I ran to my kitchen and called the police. I was assured that they would be there very soon and told to lock the doors and stay on the phone. Meanwhile, Brett was still yelling at them, which only served to piss these guys off more. I asked him to shut up, but he wouldn't listen. I was locking all the doors and windows upstairs while Brett went down to check the doors. Down in the basement, there was a huge mudroom area, and it had a thick wooden door made of 2x4 planks, kind of like a barn door. The door had a big old lock on it, some spring-loaded turn bolt, and also had a plank to set across it, like a barricade. One of the guys was pounding on this door, and Brett heard him tell the other guy to try the back door. This stupid door was one of those 1960s things that had a happy little square window right at face level, with a little curtain across it. I was at this door, trying to jam a chair under the flimsy knob, when I looked up and saw the unnamed guy just looking at me. I screamed, and the dispatcher asked me if I was alright. I barely squeaked out that one of the guys was looking right at me through the window. He was older than me, probably about 20, and he was tall. He looked very scary. His dark eyes were drilling into me. He wore this creepy, pleasant smile on his face. I had never seen this man before, but he knew my name. He tapped on the window with one finger, never breaking eye contact, and said, "Becky, let me in." I couldn't breathe. The knob was rattling as he was messing with it. He said again, "Let me in, Becky. I just want to see if you're okay, and I just want to talk." He stared at me. I didn't say anything. I was just 3 feet from him with my back pressed to the fridge when he suddenly started beating on the door and screamed, "Let me the F in this house. If I have to break in, I will kill you both, so just open the door." He looked absolutely maniacal. Then there was a loud knock at the front door, and the man went silent. He gave me the most hateful sneer I'd ever seen. I heard shouting, and he ran down the back stairs and into the woods along the back of my yard. Brett had gone to the door. It was the cops. There were 2 female officers at the front door, and one was just starting to raise her voice, asking where I was when I came to the door too. I was so relieved I started crying. I told them they had run away through the woods. Luckily, the woods were not deep. They actually ran along the bank of the large river, and there was a bridge just up from where the woods met the road. One officer ran around the back, while one stayed to get a description and take my statement. Officer number 1 came back and spoke to officer number 2, saying she saw them running across the bridge. They both left in a hurry, hopped in the cruiser and sped off. I was still crying and shaking, but I was absolutely furious at Brett for riling them up. I went to make myself some tea, thinking of all the things I could kill my sister with when she got home. I had so much anger, fear, and adrenaline pumping through me, I could have ripped her to shreds at that moment. 20 minutes later, the cruiser came back. There were 2 guys sitting in the back seat, and the officers wanted me to confirm it was the right guys. I looked through the window and saw them. They still looked terrifying to me. They were in cuffs and could not get to me, but I would not get close to them. Neither would look at me. I confirmed it was them, and we spoke a bit. I told the cops about my sister, suggesting that these 2 men should come see me. Officer number 2 kind of mumbled, "What an absolute bitch." I had to agree. I pressed charges for attempted forcible entry, property damage. They had broken a window in the living room, trespassing, disorderly conduct, and attempted assault. Initially, they both pleaded not guilty, but later admitted to some of the charges. They both got 18 months in jail and were forbidden to contact me or my boyfriend ever again, and to be at least 500 meters from me at all times. I have never heard from them again. I confronted my sister about it, and of course she denied it, then laughed about it. Laughed at me. She was an awful person. I have no idea what their true intentions were, as they maintained that they were just there to talk to me. I'm thankful I didn't have to find out.
One note at a time.
I've been doing this for about 8 months, and I want to be clear that I'm not stupid about it. I know the risks. I've read every safety guide, watched every video, and taken every precaution there is to take. Fake name, no face, no location data in any file I upload, separate phone, separate email, separate everything. None of my friends even know. My family doesn't know. I run it completely isolated from my actual life, and I do it from my apartment because I'm a homebody who barely leaves, and it works for me. And it was working fine until it wasn't. His username was something random. Numbers and letters. Nothing memorable. He subscribed about 3 months before everything happened, and for the first month he was completely normal. Tipped well, messaged regularly. Nothing that set off any alarm. I have maybe 40 regulars, and he just became one of them. I responded to his messages in a friendly and professional way. Kept it on the platform and never gave anything real. The messages got more personal gradually enough that I didn't notice the shift happen. Looking back now, I can map it exactly, but in real time, it just felt like a regular getting more comfortable, which they all do eventually. He started messaging every day. Long ones, detailed, the kind that take time to write. He talked about me like he knew me in a specific way. Not the parasocial thing where subscribers convince themselves of a connection, something more grounded than that, more certain. Then one Tuesday, he sent me a message that made me put my phone down and sit there. He described my apartment. Not directly. I know where you live. It was more just a casual comment about who he imagined I decorated. And every single detail he listed was correct. The color of my walls, which I had never shown. The fact that I had plants by the window, which I had never shown. The general layout, which I had also never shown. All of it was wrapped in this breezy tone, like he was just guessing and being playful. Haha, aren't I perceptive? I sat there on my couch and read it like 4 times. I went back through 3 months of messages and started pulling out every detail he dropped that I brushed off as coincidence or lucky observation. There were more than I expected. A reference to the sound of traffic outside my window that matched my street specifically. Comment about my delivery schedule that was accurate. Casual mention of the pharmacy 2 blocks away, like it was a known shared fact between us. I barely leave my apartment. I go out maybe twice a week for quick errands, in and out. I thought about the last 2 weeks and counted the times I'd left and then went back through his messages from that same period and felt the floor drop out from under me. Every time I had left my apartment, he had something in this next message that proved he'd seen me. Not explicitly and never directly, always wrapped in that same playful certainty. A comment about the weather that day, a reference to the color of my jacket. Once a specific detail about the way I'd been walking that he framed as a dream he'd had, just slipped it in there like it was nothing. He had been outside my building multiple times, watching me leave and come back and never saying anything, just filing it away and dropping into messages like little gifts he was leaving for me to find. I had never shown my face on my platform, not once, not even partially. He knew what I looked like anyway. I called the police that night and filed a report and gave them everything I had. Screenshots, a timeline, all of it. The officer I spoke to was thorough and took it seriously and explained that without a verified identity, there wasn't much they could act on immediately, but that they'd flag it and follow up. The account was under a fake name with an untraceable payment method. I stopped posting that same night and went completely dark. I didn't log in, didn't check messages, just shut it all down and told myself distance and silence would handle it. That he'd move on. Then without new content and without responses, he'd lose interest and disappear. For 3 weeks nothing happened and I started to breathe again. It was a Wednesday night, maybe 11, and I was on my couch watching something when I heard footsteps stop outside my door. People stop outside doors in apartment buildings all the time. It's normal. I looked up from my show and listened and didn't hear anything else and went back to watching. Then came the knock. 3 knocks. Not hard. Almost gentle, actually. The kind you do if you're trying to not disturb neighbors. I muted my show and sat there. I wasn't expecting anybody. I never have people over. Nobody comes to my door at 11 on a Wednesday. I went to the people. The man in the hallway is average height and plain looking. Somewhere in his late 20s or early 30s, I guess. I didn't recognize him at all. He was smiling at the door, with that slight performative quality of someone who was aware of being observed. He was holding something against his chest, but I couldn't make out what it was from the peephole angle. I didn't say anything. I just stood there looking at him, and he stood there smiling at the door. Then he leaned in close to the door and said my name. My real name, not my platform name. My actual full name in a conversational tone, like we were old friends and he was just stopping by. He said he wasn't going to be long, that he just wanted to meet me properly, and that he felt like we already knew each other so well and it seemed so silly to keep pretending otherwise. His voice was completely calm and pleasant the whole time. No aggression in it, which somehow made it worse than aggression would have been. Then he laughed a little and said he just wanted to play. I was already calling the police with my other hand. The dispatcher answered, and I whispered the situation and she told me to stay on the line and stay away from the door and that somebody was coming. I stood in the middle of my living room with the phone to my ear and watched the shadow of his feet in the gap under the door. He kept talking through the door the whole time, casual and unhurried, like he had nowhere to be. He referenced specific messages he'd sent me, things he said that he apparently been proud of, reciting them back like favorite lines. He talked about the times he'd seen me outside like they were fond memories. The pharmacy, the walk I'd taken around the block on a Sunday evening 2 weeks ago, and the time I'd stood in my doorway to grab a delivery and he'd been in the stairwell and I hadn't seen him. He'd been in my stairwell. He said my name one more time, softer, and then said he just wished I'd written back. Then the shadow under the door moved and his footsteps went down the hallway and I heard the stairwell door open and close. Police arrived about a few minutes later and they swept the building and the surrounding block and found no one. The stairwell door at the ground level had been propped open with a small rock, done very carefully. Building security footage showed a figure in a hood entering through that door approximately 40 minutes before he knocked on mine. He'd been in the building for 40 minutes before he knocked, standing somewhere in that building in the dark for 40 minutes before he decided it was time. The case is open. They haven't found him. I moved out the following week and I'm staying with my cousin right now while I figure out my next step. I think about him standing in the stairwell the day I grabbed my delivery from the doorway. How close was he? How I stood there for maybe 30 seconds in my doorway looking at my phone, yet he was right there in the dark and I had no clue. I just wanted to play, he said. I hear that in my head a lot still. I don't think I'm going to stop hearing it for a while. So my parents got a dog. I want to lead with that because it's important context for why I ended up in this situation. They've been talking about getting one for years. Empty nest stuff, and they finally did it 2 months ago. A 2-year-old rescue named Hank, some kind of lab mix, a big dopey thing that my mom is completely obsessed with, which is awesome. Hank seems like a good dog, but the problem is they don't fully trust him alone overnight yet because he's still adjusting and apparently ate an entire couch cushion his second week there. So when they booked a long weekend trip upstate to visit my aunt, they asked me to come stay at the house and watch him. I'm 20, home from school for the summer with no real reason to say no. Free food, a familiar bed, easy enough, I said. That was my first mistake, probably. I got to my parents' place Friday evening. They left around 6, I think, and for the first couple of hours everything was completely fine. Hank was happy to see me and we watched TV. I made food and he sat with me by my feet the whole time, which my mom warned me he does. Normal dog stuff. I went to bed around midnight with Hank at the foot of the bed and fell asleep fast. I woke up at some point in the night to Hank growling. Not barking, but growling. Low and continuous. The kind of sound that's more vibration than noise. I sat up and he was standing at the bedroom door facing the hallway. Completely rigid, every muscle in him locked up. I'd known this dog for 2 months and heard him make approximately 0 serious sounds. He was the least intimidating animal I'd ever encountered. Seeing him like that in the dark was genuinely startling. I listened. The house was quiet. I told him to relax and he didn't. He just kept that low growl going with his eyes fixed on the hallway. I got up and checked the house. Every room, every door, and every window. Everything locked and nothing out of place. I even checked the basement, which I hate doing at any hours at night, but I did it. And nothing. I went back to bed. Hank eventually settled and I fell back asleep. In the morning, I'd mostly forgotten about it. Saturday was fine. Took Hank for a long walk, did nothing, ate my parents' food again, and completely relaxed. I went to bed earlier, maybe at 11 or so, tired from the walk. I woke up at 2 a.m. to Hank gone from the bed. I could hear him somewhere in the house. That same low growl, and I got up and followed it. He was in the kitchen standing in front of the basement door, in the same posture as the night before, with the same locked up stillness. I stood there in the dark kitchen in my socks looking at him. I felt something I hadn't felt the night before, which was that the dog was not going to move from the door. I stood there for a long moment, then I heard something on the other side of it. Just a single soft sound, something shifting, like weight redistributing on the wooden basement stairs. One quiet creak and then nothing. I grabbed the knife on the counter, took out the biggest one, and called 911 from the kitchen while Hank stood guard at the door. I whispered the address and told him I thought somebody was in the basement, and the dispatcher told me to stay on the line and stay away from the basement door, which I was obviously happy to do. 2 officers got there in 4 minutes, and I let them in the front, and one of them took Hank by the collar while the other opened the basement door with his hand on his holster. They found him on the stairs. A man, probably mid-40s, sitting on the 4th step from the bottom in the dark, like he'd been there for a while. Not armed or aggressive, but just sitting there. He looked exhausted more than anything. When the officer asked him what he was doing, he said he used to live here. Saying it like that explained everything. He said he just needed somewhere to sleep, and he knew the back basement window latch had always been broken and figured nobody would notice. The broken window latch my parents have apparently had for years and never fixed. The officer looked at me and I looked at the officer. They ran his name. He had a record, nothing violent, mostly trespassing and vagrancy, and he had indeed owned that house at some point and sold it 12 years ago. Whether that made him feel entitled to come back and sleep in the basement, I genuinely could not tell you. He seemed more sad than dangerous though. They took him out and I gave my statement in the kitchen while Hank sat on my feet the whole time. Here's the thing that I keep coming back to though. The officer who cleared the basement walked the whole thing before they brought the guy out. He came back upstairs and mentioned that the old couch down there, the one my parents had been meaning to throw out for years, had apparently been slept on recently. Multiple times recently, he said, based on the indentation and some personal items nearby, like a water bottle and stuff like that. My parents had been in that house 9 years. Hank has been there for 2 months. You can draw your own conclusions about how long this had been going on before Hank showed up and started waking people up at 2 a.m. I fixed the window latch myself the next morning, bought the hardware at the store down the road and watched a video and got it done in about 20 minutes. I didn't mention it to my parents until I got home. My mom cried a little. My dad immediately went and bought a security system. Hank got an extra treat that night. He deserved probably about 100 of them. I'm 19 and my 2 younger brothers, Damon who is 16 and Kobe who just turned 13, We're home alone for the weekend because our parents drove down to our grandma's place in Kentucky for her birthday. We'd been left alone before plenty of time, so nobody was stressed about it. I was the oldest, so I was technically in charge, which basically just meant I got to pick what we ordered for dinner and had to make sure Kobe didn't stay up until 4 in the morning on his Xbox. Pretty standard stuff. Friday night was fine. We ordered wings and watched a movie. Kobe was in bed by midnight, which was later than our parents would have allowed, but I wasn't going to fight him on it. Damon and I stayed up for another hour or so and then called it. Saturday was equally normal right up until around 9 at night. I was in the living room on my phone and Damon was at the kitchen table doing something on his laptop. And Kobe was in his room gaming when Damon looked up and said there was somebody in the backyard. I went to the kitchen window and looked out. There were 2 of them standing in the yard, not at the fence line, not passing through, standing maybe 30 feet from the back door, completely still facing the house. Both are wearing white masks, not Halloween store masks, not cheap plastic things, full white featureless masks that covered their entire faces, the kind with no expression at all. No holes for a mouth, just 2 eye openings, and flat white nothing everywhere else. I stood at that window for probably 5 full seconds just staring, trying to process what I was looking at. Then a third one stepped out of the shadows near the tree line at the back of the yard and stood with the other 2. I pulled Damon away from the window and told him to go get Kobe right now and bring him downstairs and to move fast but not run. He looked at my face and didn't ask questions and went. I checked the back door. It was locked. Checked the sliding door off the dining room. Also locked. Went to the front and checked that. All good. All the downstairs windows I could reach I checked one by one while Damon got Kobe and brought him down. Kobe came into the living room still holding his controller and started to ask what was happening. And I cut him off and told him to sit on the couch and stay away from the windows. I looked out the front window. One of them was now standing in the front yard. I hadn't heard a gate open or close. Also hadn't heard footsteps around the side of the house. One of the 3 from the back was just in the front yard now. Same posture. Facing the house with that flat white face tilted slightly upward toward the window I was looking through. I stepped back and called my dad. It went straight to voicemail. I called my mom and same. I left a message that was probably not very coherent and then called the cops and actually got through. The dispatcher asked me if anyone had tried to enter the house and I said, not yet, and she said to stay inside and away from windows and that officers were being sent. Kobe was asking questions nonstop and Damon was trying to keep him quiet. I was moving from window to window trying to check where they were without getting close enough to be seen. 2 were still in the backyard, 1 in the front. That was 3 counted for. Then something knocked on the front door. 4 slow knocks with a pause between each one. Kind of even sounding, impatient. Like whoever was doing it had all night and knew it. Kobe grabbed my arm. I told him quietly that we were not going to answer it and that the police were coming. More knocks. Then nothing for a while. I checked the front window again from an angle where I couldn't be seen straight on. The one who had been in the front yard was gone. I did not find that reassuring one bit. I went back to checking every window I could without getting close. The 2 in the backyard had moved closer to the house, maybe 20 feet or so. Still not moving toward the door, but closer than before. Just standing there in the dark with those white masks, picking up a little bit of the light coming from the kitchen. Something scraped along the side of the house. A slow dragging sound from the back toward the front along the exterior wall. Like something being dragged across the siding at waist height. Kobe made a sound and I put my hand on his shoulder and kept him from saying anything. The scraping stopped at the front corner of the house and then nothing again. I called my dad again. This time he picked up and I talked fast and low and told him what was happening. He told me he was calling the police himself and to lock ourselves in an upstairs room and not to open any door for any reason. I told him I'd already called and they were coming. He went upstairs. I put Kobe and Damon in my parents' room, which had a solid door and lock, and I told him to push the dresser in front of it, which Damon did while I stood in the hallway watching the staircase. Then every light in the house went out. Somebody had cut the power. I got into the room and helped Damon finish moving the dresser, and we sat in the dark on the floor, all 3 of us against the far wall, and just listened. The house was quiet. No white noise. Just the 3 of us breathing in whatever was outside. We heard the front door open. Just opening. The specific sound of it, the slight creak it always made on the hinges, opening like somebody had a key or the lock had given up entirely. Then we heard footsteps on the hardwood downstairs. Definitely more than one person. Kobe was shaking my arm, because he was shaking so hard. And I held on to him and kept my mouth next to his ear and told him in the quietest voice I'd ever used that the police were almost here, and to stay completely quiet no matter what. The footsteps moved through the downstairs into the kitchen. back through the living room, stopping at the bottom of the stairs. One set of footsteps started coming up. I could hear them on each step. That same slow pace, not rushing, just climbing, reaching the top, moving down the hall. They stopped outside the bedroom door. Not for a long time. Then the handle moved, hit the lock and released. Then a soft knock. I had 911 still open on my phone, and I typed in the notes app and held it up for Damon to see. They were inside.
You see, you learn to set down eventually. But there are certain nights that just become part of you. And not in a good way. What I'm about to tell you happened about 4 years ago, and I still think about it more than I probably should. I picked up an overnight through a staffing agency. The client was an 81-year-old man named Alfred. His son Greg had called looking for someone experienced with late-stage cognitive decline, Lewy body dementia specifically. Greg was polite, professional. He explained that he lived 40 minutes away, worked early mornings, and needed someone to cover his father from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. Just one night to start, he said. See how it goes. I showed up around 9:30. It was a split level on a quiet road where the houses sat far apart and the trees had grown in close. Greg walked me through quickly. Kitchen, bathroom, the hospital bed set up in what used to be the dining room. Alfred was already in bed. Greg introduced us. Alfred looked at me with clear eyes, said pleasure to meet you, and seemed completely fine, sharp even. Greg kissed his father on the forehead and left. That was my first night in that house, and my last. The first few hours were uneventful. I sat in the kitchen with a book. I wasn't really reading. Alfred slept. I checked on him every half hour. Each time, he was on his back, breathing slow and even, hands folded on his chest like a man who had long since made peace with sleep. Around midnight, he was facing the wall. Same quiet breathing, just no longer facing the ceiling. I didn't make anything of it. A little after 2, I heard his voice from the other room. He was awake, staring upward. I asked if he needed anything. He said very quietly, "She keeps coming to the foot of the bed." I asked who he had met. He turned in a perfect normal tone, said he needed some water. I brought it. He thanked me, closed his eyes, and he went to sleep inside 2 minutes. I want to be clear that up to this point, I wasn't scared. People with Lewy body dementia have vivid hallucinations, visual ones, often of people or animals. Whatever Alfred saw at the foot of his bed was a product of his neurology. I knew that. I reminded myself of that. What I couldn't easily explain was what happened around 4 in the morning. I walked through the dark living room to stretch my legs and stopped at the hallway. At the end of it, maybe 30 feet away, Alfred was standing in front of the closed storage room door, socks, thin cotton pants, and one hand raised resting flat against it. I called his name softly. He didn't move. I walked toward him and called again. He turned, perfectly calm, he said. I was just checking. I asked what he was checking on. He looked at the door, then back at me. She doesn't like it when I open it. I walked him back to bed. He went without resistance, pulled the blanket up himself, closed his eyes. I stood outside that storage room for a long time afterward. The door had a push-button lock on the knob, the kind you could lock from the inside. It was locked. I told myself Greg had probably locked it before he left. I went back to the kitchen, kept the light on, and held my book without reading it. At 5:15, I heard the storage room door open. The small mechanical click of the push button releasing, the soft groan of the hinges, and then a silence that felt louder than any sound before it. I stood up slowly and walked to the hallway. The door was open about 4 inches, dark behind it. Alfred was in bed. I could see him from where I stood, asleep, on his back, hands folded on his chest. I turned back toward the kitchen. That's when Alfred was standing directly behind me. Not in his bed, behind me. Close enough that I nearly walked into him. He was holding a claw hammer at his side, worn wooden handle, knuckles white around the grip. His eyes were wide open and fixed on me. But there was nothing behind them I recognized as the man I'd met that evening. Not confusion, not the vague wandering expression I'd come to expect, just flat, purposeful attention. He swung before I could say his name. I got my forearm up, and the hammer glanced off and hit the wall. I moved back and sideways, putting the hallway between us. He came toward me again with the same measured, unhurried walk. No raving, no shouting, completely silent. That was the part that stayed with me. I got around him, through the living room, grabbed my bag from the kitchen chair without stopping, and went out the front door. I called Greg from the driveway, hands shaking. He didn't believe me at first. Then something in my voice made him stop talking. He said he'd be there in 40 minutes. I stood in the cold and watched the windows until his headlights came up in the road. He found Alfred in the hospital bed, asleep, hands folded on his chest. The hammer was on the kitchen table. Greg called later to apologize. Said his father had never been violent before, didn't know where the hammer had come from. I told him I didn't blame Alfred, and that I hope he found the right help for him. I never went back. Here's where I've landed 4 years later. The easy explanation is dementia, sudden aggression, a man moving through his home on muscle memory. I don't dismiss it, but I can't fully put down the other possibility. Alfred, when I met him, had been sharp, present. The confusion came and went away that felt almost managed. In the storage room door, I was meant to look at it. My attention was pulled down the hallway while Alfred was already behind me. Whether his illness works in ways that made that accidental, or whether some deliberate part of him had arranged it, I genuinely cannot say. What I can say is that the attack was not frantic. It was silent, and it was aimed. A man who wanted to appear lost had, and in the moment, known exactly what he was doing. I hope Greg finds the right kind of help for his father. Whatever is happening inside Alfred, illness or something else, wearing illness like a coat, he needs more than an overnight aid can give him, and that aid will not be me. I've been doing electrical work for going on 11 years now. In that time, I've been inside maybe 2,000 or 3,000 homes. You develop a feel for things, not in a mystical sense, just pattern recognition. You walk into enough spaces, you start reading them the way you read weather. Something in the air pressure shifts and your body knows it before your brain catches up. This particular job was in the fall of my 3rd year. I was working for a mid-sized residential contractor at the time. 6 guys, 1 dispatcher, and a rotating list of service calls that came through the main office line. The schedule had been messy that week. Our dispatcher was out sick. Calls were getting shuffled around, and more than once, someone showed up at a job that wasn't theirs. My supervisor, a quiet guy named Terrence, assigned me to a property about 40 minutes outside of the city. A homeowner had called in about flickering lights throughout the house. Standard stuff. Loose neutral probably. The kind of thing you clear up in under an hour if nothing else is hiding behind the walls. The drive out was long and forgettable. Rural roads, mostly. The address took me down a 2-lane highway that narrowed into a gravel road before terminating into a long unpaved driveway. The house at the end of it was old but not dramatically so. A 2-story colonial. White siding gone gray, black shutters. It looked like someone had been maintaining it just enough to keep it from looking abandoned. Emphasis on just enough. The lawn was cut, but the edges were ragged. A car sat in the driveway with a film of pollen across the hood. The kind of film that builds up over a week, maybe 2. Didn't look like anyone had driven it recently. Didn't match someone actively living there. I parked, grabbed my bag, and walked up. A woman answered the door almost immediately, as though she'd been standing behind it. She was in her mid-50s, plain looking, wearing a cardigan despite the warmth of the afternoon. She smiled when she saw me. There was something slightly delayed about it, maybe a half-second lag between seeing me and producing the expression. I told myself I was reading into it. I told her who I was and why I was there. She said yes, come in, and stepped aside. The inside of the house smelled of synthetic pine, something faintly organic underneath the cleaner, like fruit that had turned. I followed her through the foyer toward the kitchen, where she said the lights had been flickering worst. I noticed the furniture, the framed photos on the wall, the bowl of wood and decorative apples on the counter. All of it normal, all of it staged in a way that felt normal. She left me to work, and I opened the panel under the stairs first, checking the breakers. Everything looked fine at a glance, no obvious burns, no trip breakers. I started tracing the circuit for the kitchen lighting. I was crouched near the panel when the overhead lighting fixture dimmed for a second, then came back. Not a flicker exactly, more like the house exhaled. I noted it and kept moving. About 20 minutes in, I realized I hadn't heard her at all. No movement, no sound from another room, no television. Just that particular silence that large, still spaces get. I assumed she stepped outside. Then I heard her voice from somewhere above me. Low even. Not a phone call. Phone calls have a rhythm, gaps and starts. This was nearly continuous. The same cadence, repeating, pausing, repeating again. One word surfaced briefly, almost recognizable, then dissolved before I could place it. I noted it and moved on. I've seen weird houses before. Didn't want to look paranoid over nothing. I pulled the switch plate off the kitchen fixture and found a junction I wanted a second look at. Wire nuts that had been redone recently, the wrapping still clean and white against the older wiring. Someone had been in here. Not necessarily a red flag. Previous owner could have done it. Any number of explanations. But I couldn't find a permit record when I pulled up the address on my phone. The work wasn't documented. I was about to climb down from the step stool when the footsteps overhead stopped abruptly. Then the house went very quiet. I stepped down and turned to get a different tool from my bag. She was standing in the kitchen doorway. I hadn't heard her come from downstairs. I hadn't heard anything at all. My hand stayed on the bag longer than it needed to. I took an instinctive half step back before I caught myself. I said something like, "Didn't hear you come down." She said, "I've always been light on my feet." Same delayed smile. I went back to work. I had maybe 10 minutes left. I was under the counter checking the ground wire when I heard the front door open and close. I assumed a family member. Then I heard a second set of footsteps in the foyer, heavier, deliberate. Too heavy to be hers. It didn't match the way she moved. Then a third set. Then quiet. I came out from under the counter. She was standing against the far wall of the kitchen with her hands folded in front of her, watching me. Not the way someone watches a repairman. The way someone watches something they've been waiting on. I asked if she had family in the house. She said, "It's fine." Not yes, not no. It's fine. I packed my bag. I told her I identified the issue. That I'd call in the estimate from the van and have someone from the office follow up. She didn't argue or ask any questions. In 11 years of service work, homeowners always ask questions. She just nodded and walked me to the door. When I got back to the van, I sat for a moment. The upper windows were dark, then one of them wasn't. A figure standing back from the glass, mostly shadow. Then a second shape, slightly on the left. I thought it might have been a reflection. Then it moved. I drove. I didn't call it in right away. At the time, none of it felt like something I could explain over a phone. I ran through it in my head, and it all flattened out. Voices upstairs, footsteps, a woman who stood too still. Nothing you could hand to a dispatcher and have it land right. It all sounded like nothing when I tried to say it out loud. So I waited until I was back at the office and reported it to Terrence in person. Told him to flag the address. I don't know what he did with that information immediately. What I know is that I kept thinking about it for days after, and eventually, I pushed until something moved. The wiring I found under that switch plate had been deliberately disconnected and reconnected. Clean work. Done by someone who knew exactly what they were doing, and exactly what kind of call it would generate. When I finally pressed Terrence about who had originally been scheduled for that job, he didn't have a clear answer. The shuffled schedule, the rerouted calls, no clean record of who was supposed to go out there instead of me. I think that's why she looked at me the way she did when I came from under that counter. Not caught, just recalibrating, like I wasn't who she'd been expecting. Police went out within the week. The house was empty. Nothing came of it officially. I still think about whoever was supposed to get the call instead of me. I work in a medical records administration at a mid-sized hospital in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's not glamorous work. Mostly I sit in a basement-level office processing patient files, cross-referencing discharge paperwork, flagging inconsistencies for the clinical team upstairs. The kind of job that exists in the building full of people but somehow feels completely solitary. My department is just me and 2 colleagues, Priya and Dennis, and a supervisor named Greer who works remotely on Fridays. This was a Thursday in the deep part of autumn. About 2 years ago, Priya had taken the day off and Dennis left at his usual 5:15. I stayed behind because we had the quarterly audit submission due the next morning, and I was the one who had volunteered to finish it. That was my mistake in the grand scheme of things. Not because of the audit, but because staying late meant I was the only person on that floor. The basement level of the hospital isn't connected to the main wards. It's a separate administrative wing, records, billing, HR, a few storage rooms. The corridor is long and fluorescent lit, and the lights are on motion sensors after 7 p.m. to save energy. So as you walk, the section behind you slowly dims back to nothing. I always hated that, even before this happened. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It was around 7:30. I'd been deep in the audit for a couple hours. Headphones on, coffee going cold beside me. I took the headphones off to stretch, and there it was. This faint medicinal smell. Sharp, almost sweet. Like antiseptic, but not quite. It's a hospital, so smells aren't unusual. But our wing didn't smell like the clinical floors. It smelled like old paper and recycled air. This was different, and it was coming from inside the office. I figured it was the cleaning staff. They come through the basement on Thursdays. I didn't hear the carts though. Usually you could hear them from halfway down the hall. That rattling metal sound that echoed in the corridor. There was nothing, just the smell. I told myself they were probably working lighter that night. I put my headphones back on. About 40 minutes later, I got up to use the bathroom at the end of the corridor. When I came back, my desk chair was facing the wrong way. I know how it sounds, I know. It was facing the door instead of the monitor. I'm a creature of habit. I always try to push my chair back and square to the desk when I stand up. It's an unconscious thing. Priya used to make fun of me for it, but I specifically remembered pushing it in before I walked out. The chair wasn't pushed back. It was turned 90 degrees like someone had sat in it and swiveled around to face the entrance. The seat felt faintly warm when I put my hand on it, and it wasn't square to anything. It was angled slightly. The weight would be if someone had stood up in a hurry. I stood in the doorway for a second, running back through the last hour in my head. I couldn't dismiss it confidently enough to let it go, which bothered me more than the chair itself. But I didn't want to overreact over what could still be nothing. I straightened it, sat down, and kept working, building settle. People misremember. I had an audit to finish. At 9:47, I remember checking the time specifically. I heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Slow, even footsteps. Not the rubber-soled squeak of the cleaning staff. Something softer, more deliberate. They passed my door and kept going toward the storage end of the hall. I took my headphones off and listened. Those sensors had never failed in the 3 years I'd worked that shift. Not once. Even when they glitched, they'd flicker, that half-second shudder before catching. But I heard nothing. No click from the panels, no flicker. Just dead silence where the lights should have been. I opened my office door and looked out. The corridor was dark from about halfway down. The lights that should have responded to whoever just walked past hadn't come on at all. The hall was empty in both directions. I told myself it was the sensors. Told myself it was the sound carrying strangely through the ventilation from the floor above. Old hospitals make noise. I went back to my desk, but I didn't put the headphones on again. I finished the audit just after 10:30. I saved everything, backed it up on a shared drive, sent a confirmation email to Greer. I was running on adrenaline by then. That specific kind you get when you've been in a quiet building alone for too long. Hyper-aware, startling at nothing, embarrassed at yourself for being startled. I packed my bag and pulled on my coat. Before I turned off the desk lamp, I walked across the hall to the records room to drop off a physical folder I'd been working from. The records room is lined floor to ceiling with filing shelves, 2 rows deep, with a narrow walking aisle between them. I went to the correct shelf, slotted the folder in. I was turning to leave when I noticed that a few folders on the lower shelf near the far end were out of place. Not scattered, not messy, just handled, pulled slightly forward, like someone had been leafing through them carefully and almost put them back. And then I noticed the shelf itself. One of the units at the far end was pulled out from the wall maybe 6 inches, the way you'd move it if you were accessing the secondary row behind it. Those shelves are heavy. They don't move on their own. You have to grip the handle and pull deliberately. I stood there looking at it. The gap behind the shelf was dark. The room was quiet. And I became aware that the quality of the silence had changed. It had a weight to it that hadn't when I walked in. I should have left. I know that now. But something made me take one step toward it. Just one. And then the light from the overhead panel caught the gap at the right angle. There were eyes looking back at me. Not glowing, but catching the light wrong, reflecting more than they should have. The way a lens does, or glass. Still and human, and set deep in a face I couldn't make out. A body that wasn't moving, standing pressed into the darkness behind the shelf, like it had been there for a long time. We looked at each other for what I can only describe as a moment that had no business lasting as long as it did. And then I ran. Behind me, as I hit the corridor, I heard it. One shelf slamming down, then another. Then a chain of metal shifting and collapsing like something was tearing through the room to get out. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I was through the front doors. I drove home. I poured a glass of wine I didn't take.